Hello, we have Jemima Small here, which is one of our books by Tamsin Winter. It's an Usborne books. Now I'd like to read chapter 18, Fat Club. Jemima, Lottie whispered for the millionth time in our French lesson. Are you free at lunchtime? Oh no, sorry, I forgot. You've got Fat Club. Which she accompanied with a fake sad face. Don't feel bad. I'm sure when the teacher sees you, she'll make you captain. I sighed. Sitting within 2 meters of Lottie Freeman should be considered a breach of your human rights. Leave her alone, Lottie, Miki said. You should go to a zero personality club. Oh, don't say that, Miki, Lottie said. Not when we're starring in the production together. She smirked at him. What? Miki said. Didn't you go to the drama studio at break? Miss Nisha's put the list up. You got Bert. I got Bert! Miki shouted. Quiet down, Miki, Mr. Picard said, and if you have to speak, at least try to do it in French. Brilliant, I whispered. Mr. Picard stared at me, so I put on a French accent and said, brilliant. He rolled his eyes, like it was my fault the word brilliant is the same in French. He turned around and went back to helping Caleb, who was deliberately just speaking English words with a French accent. By the way, I got Mary Poppins, Lottie whispered sweetly over the desk, deliberately making eye contact with me. So, Bert, I guess we're best friends. Miki looked at me, then back at Lottie. Only in the production, Lottie. He whispered in my ear. Lucky I'm good at acting. Lottie narrowed her eyes. Shame you can't be in the production as well, Jemima, but I guess you've got other priorities. I couldn't think of anything to say back to her, so I turned the page of my textbook and started copying out some verb phrases. What could I say? Lottie was technically speaking the truth. Anyway, Dad had already banned me from swearing in foreign languages. Miki drew a rat in the corner of my page. Hey, he whispered, don't listen to Lottie. Everyone knows she's 99% rodent. When I got to the sports hall at lunchtime, nerves flooded my body as though they were attached to my blood cells. There were some boys kicking a football against the outside wall, and a group of year 10s were standing around a bench opposite looking at their phones. A few people watched as I walked up the path to the entrance. I flinched, expecting someone to shout something, but one of the PE teachers appeared and started doing keep-ups with the boys' football. I put my hand on the sports hall door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. The first thing I saw was a flash of super luminous honey blonde hair. It was swept back with a black headband covered in white stars. The Empress card I'd picked from Luna's tarot pack last night came into my mind. I closed the door behind me and she turned around. It was Gina Grantley Bond. Her black sports leggings were covered in little lightning bolts, exactly like the ones on the tower card. I started to feel a bit weird. Luna's premonitions were usually wildly inaccurate. Welcome, Gina said with an extraordinarily wide smile. Jemima? I nodded, and her smile went even wider until it covered approximately 75% of her face. If she smiled any harder, she'd probably get a facial injury. I didn't understand why she was so pleased about running Fat Club. Maybe she liked humiliating people. I'm Gina, come in. Heidi, Harry, and Brandon were putting out chairs in a circle. I recognized 2 others from the meeting we'd had about the newspaper article. They looked like they were in year 10 or 11. You're the last one, Gina said. Sit down. The last one? I said, but there's only 6 of us. Gina's smile dropped by about 30%. I'm afraid this is it. She looked around awkwardly as Brandon stacked some of the chairs back up. Some of the parents read the article in the newspaper, you see, and they started a group. They made it seem like my class was, well, most people didn't agree to their children taking part. Gina suddenly clapped her hands like she was breaking a spell. Anyway, the main thing is that you're all here, and I'm so excited to start my healthy lifestyle program with you. She clapped again and smiled the biggest smile I'd ever seen. It radiated from her, as though her skin was made of pure smile, nothing else, like a real live goddess was beaming right at me. It was annoying, because it made it really hard not to like her. Gina explained how we weren't there as a punishment, which was sort of a lie because it was lunchtime, so it was technically a detention. But I made a mature decision not to say anything. Mainly because that morning before I'd left the house, Dad had confiscated the eyeliner and given me strict instructions not to mention any of the following during Gina's class or I'd be cleaning his van tomorrow. 1. Punishments, including medieval torture techniques. 2. My human rights. 3. Exaggerations or lies. and 4, anything Luna had ever told me. It didn't exactly leave much to talk about, apart from my dad being a tyrant dictator. Gina said we mustn't feel like we'd done anything wrong, but that was exactly what the class felt like, so I only half believed her. Now, let's start by playing a little game to get to know each other. I'm not psychic, but I'd had a feeling she would do something like this. I sank into my chair. Tell us your name and something totally awesome about yourself. I'll start. I'm Gina, and I used to be a Paralympic coach. I wondered what had gone wrong in her life that she used to be a Paralympic coach, and now she had to teach at Clifton Academy. She looked down at her clipboard. Where's Nathaniel Jackson? As you're in year 11, let's start with you. The boy sitting opposite Gina lifted his hand. Hi, it's Nate. Okay, tell us something totally awesome about yourself, Nate. I looked at the row of pin badges on the lapel of Nate's blazer. There was an Eco Council badge, a prefect pin, a photography club pin, a tiny flag of Nigeria, and one at the bottom just saying legend. He had loads of things to choose from. Well, Nate said, I met Jessie Lingard over the summer. Wow, Gina said at exactly the same time as everyone else. I made a mental note to find out who Jessie Lingard was after the class. By the time Gina got to me, I'd learned that the girl in year 10, Maya, had just passed her grade 4 flute. Harry had read 10 books over the summer holidays. Heidi had started writing a book called The Souls of the Forest and was already on chapter 9. And Brandon Taylor was year 10's unofficial arm wrestling champion. So, when Gina said my name, I couldn't think of anything. Oh, come on, Jemima, Gina said. I'm sure there are loads of awesome things about you. I don't know, I said. The only thing coming into my mind was a spelling bee I'd won in year 5, which sounded stupid. Gina's face dropped, like she was actually upset I wasn't joining in. Don't feel sorry for Gina, I told myself. She's the reason this stupid class was invented. Didn't you win the science award last year, Jemima? Heidi said. And the maths prize? Yeah, and the reading challenge, Harry added. She beat me by 2 books. Gina beamed at them. Thank you, Heidi and Harry. Wow, Jemima, that sounds pretty awesome to me. I felt my cheeks glow pink. Oh yeah, it's weird how people can list your achievements and you still feel like an idiot. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, Gina said, clapping herself. What a totally awesome game. She should probably check the definition of the word awesome and game. I'm so excited to start working with you all. Everything Gina said ended in an exclamation mark. My English teacher, Mr. Jackson, was always telling us you shouldn't do that. So, my program is designed to help you live your healthiest life. Gina started going on about all the things she would be teaching us this term. I stopped listening and looked down at the lines marking out the basketball courts. They reminded me of last year, when I would stare at them while everyone else got picked before me, as if the whole team would lose if it had me on it. That's what people assume when your PE kit says XL on the label. They don't care that you begged your dad for new trainers with a special grip pattern on the soles because you wanted to make an extra effort in PE at secondary school. They don't care that you've had a basketball hoop up in your drive since forever and that you're actually pretty accurate at shooting. They don't know it's the only sport you enjoy. All they see is you stepping backwards and telling Miss Newton you don't feel well so you don't have to see their disappointed faces when you end up on their team. Then you sit on the bench with your hoodie up and try not to watch the game. Try not to care. Because why try to win for a team that didn't want you in the first place? So, Gina was saying, I thought it would be nice for us to have a little picnic and get to know each other in this first class. We looked at Gina in silence as she stood up and dragged a cool box into the middle of the circle. She handed out paper plates and forks and then started taking out little containers. Come on, everyone, tuck in. But no one moved. It was a weird feeling, a bit like whenever Jasper was nice to me. I could never be sure if he was secretly planning something bad. Like this time ages ago when he said he got me a present. He made me close my eyes and hold up my hands, only when I opened them, his pet tarantula Tornado was about to crawl up my arm. I froze. It was the first time I'd ever held a tarantula. Jasper told me later that it was a good thing I did freeze because he'd found out that tarantulas can die from being dropped. Luckily for Tornado, I already knew that. They have a really fragile exoskeleton. So, Jasper's stupid trick to scare me backfired. I froze because I also knew that tarantulas are a nervous species, and when they're nervous, they flick their bum hairs at you. I looked around the circle and no one was eating. Okay, Gina said, let me show you what I've got, and maybe you can all try just a little bit. She picked up a box and said proudly, this is quinoa. I don't suppose you've ever heard of it, but it's edible seeds from a herbaceous plant, I said, kind of by accident. The ancient civilizations of South America used to eat it, and I stopped because everyone in the circle was staring at me. My auntie's a vegan, I explained. You have to eat stuff like that when you're a vegan. I didn't tell them about the UN declaring 2013 the International Year of Quinoa, or that quinoa has been into outer space because astronauts take it on long voyages because it keeps for ages. I'd already learned from my show and tell presentation last year that people are not interested in the history of quinoa. That's brilliant, Jemima, Gina beamed. And quinoa is very low in fat and high in essential minerals like iron, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So it's like eating the periodic table, Nate said. Sort of, Gina laughed, but it's delicious. She went round the circle, scooping some onto our plates. Harry raised it to his nose and sniffed. Gina brought out more boxes of food and piled more onto our plates until we had lentil salad, vegetables, black beans, super grain spirals, spinach mini muffins, and crisps made out of beetroot. It was like having lunch with Willy Wonka, if Willy Wonka had a vegetable patch instead of a chocolate factory. While Gina told us about the class and promised we wouldn't be running laps around the field, I swallowed a forkful of lentils. They actually tasted okay, like the type of stuff Luna cooked. Jasper called it fart food. I made sure I didn't eat too much. The last thing I needed on the first day of Fat Club was flatulence. As it's such a small group, Gina said, maybe you'd like to share how you felt about being selected for my class. Selected, Maya said. Selected makes it sound good. People get selected for sports team. Being selected for a class because you're fat isn't good. Gina looked at Maya sympathetically, but she didn't say anything. Probably because there wasn't anything she could say. Maya was right. Being selected for Gina's class was so bad it made front page news. My mom's gone mad about it, Maya carried on. She said I have to lose weight in this class or I might not go on holiday next year. Maya's mom sounded worse than my dad. I didn't think that was even possible. We wanted to be in the Christmas production, Harry said, but our mom said this was more important. Yeah, Heidi said, putting her empty plate on the floor. She doesn't want us to end up like her. She's got bad knees. Gina's eyes looked sad, and her smile had completely disappeared. Brandon shrugged. My mom says there's more of me to love. I hated Brandon, but I couldn't help smiling. It was probably the type of thing my mom would say if she'd stuck around, like the exact opposite of anything my dad said. Jemima, Gina said, what did your mom say? And I wanted to bury my head in the tub of quinoa. Brandon looked at me. He was probably the only one who knew about my mom. He was still friends with Jasper when she left. Jemima lives with her dad, Brandon said. He smiled at me, which was extremely weird, considering the number of times he'd called me Cowpat at primary school. I'm sorry, Jemima, Gina said. I shook my head like it didn't matter. So, what did your dad say? I put my fork down and thought for a minute, but whenever someone mentioned my mom unexpectedly, that empty bit in my heart hurt, and it was hard to think properly. So I said, my dad is basically a dictator, so he grounded me and confiscated some of my belongings. What? Gina said, her eyes widening. Because of this class? Yeah, I had to clean out his garage and everything. He said the physical labor would do me good. It wasn't completely untrue. Oh my goodness, Gina said. Everyone stared at me like I'd won first prize for Fat Club's worst parent. I shrugged. It's just what my dad's like. Brandon gave me a weird look, but what did he know? He hadn't seen my dad for years. He could easily have turned into a dictator since then. I'm sorry to hear that, Jemima, Gina said. I'm sorry to hear what you've all said. Those letters weren't supposed to get you into trouble. Quite the opposite. The aim of the class is to empower you, all of you, to make good decisions about your life and your body. I truly believe the key to doing that is appreciating how amazing you are. I've worked with all kinds of people with all kinds of different bodies, from world-class athletes to primary school children, and I've never failed once. Never. Maybe right now you're feeling like you've failed, but I promise after a few weeks you'll be feeling stronger and healthier and happier than ever before. And she clapped her hands. That's the GGB effect. She stood up and pointed to the back of her t-shirt. See? Had a picture of the British flag and the Olympic logo on it. Underneath, it said Team GGB in black letters. It's spelled wrong, Gina, I said. It's supposed to be GB for Great Britain. Ha, she said. No, it's GGB, Gina Grantley Bond. You're on my team now. She smiled another gigantic smile. And no matter how hard I tried, it was literally impossible not to smile too. It was like she'd cast a magic spell over us, making it seem normal to have your own initials printed on the back of your t-shirt. Oh, I almost forgot. She picked up a metal flask and poured a dark green liquid into paper cups. I'll also be teaching you about different types of nutritious drinks, including plant milks. Brandon scratched his head. Plant milks? How do you milk a plant? Gina stared at him and blinked a few times. Why don't you have a look on YouTube later, Brandon? Now, this small cup of wheatgrass juice will do wonders for your body and mind. And not only that, it tastes delicious. I held mine up to the light. It looked like pond water. If Gina's drink gave me dysentery, I would definitely sue the school. Gina tipped her head back and gulped it down in one. Delicious! Wheatgrass is one of the most nutritional liquids on the planet. It will give you an immediate sense of well-being. I watched Maya and Heidi eyeing their cups suspiciously, and I peered into mine. Could a cup of wheatgrass really make me feel better about myself? I took a deep breath and poured the whole cup down my throat. Immediately, a memory popped into my mind. When Dad took me and Jasper to the city farm ages ago, and Brandon and Alina came with us. We all had a go at milking this gigantic cow with huge swollen udders. It was terrifying and unhygienic. Brandon kept pushing me until I was squashed up right next to it. Suddenly, the cow stepped sideways and there was this loud squelching noise. The next thing I knew, my legs were covered in cow pat. I could feel its disgusting warmth absorbing into my socks. I cried for the rest of the day and made Dad clean my wellies off with a hose. Brandon called me cow pat almost every day at primary school after that. I remembered the cow's hot, grassy breath, the saliva dripping from its mouth, and the stench of fresh manure on my feet. That was exactly what Gina's wheatgrass drink tasted like being breathed and pooed on simultaneously by a cow. Brandon held his cup up to his lips. What's it taste like, Jemima? I looked at him for a moment, then smiled my best smile. I tried to get it to exactly 75% of my face, just like Gina's, and then I said, delicious.